Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and praise be Allahtimore. Yeah. Okay. So this one starts on March 22nd, and I'm sure there's no coincidence in that date. But so a few days after the Back to Baltimore videos, and as I'm prepping the trespassing video, and Mary sent me this picture on Facebook Messenger, and she asked me if I could see the star pattern in here. And, I really couldn't. Hey, I'm not so good. Right? And so I told her that I could see the cross pattern in it, but that I really couldn't see the star. So she sent me this. All right, and sure enough, of course, you really can't, right? See the point, it comes to the point here. If she missed this or didn't do it, but you can see that this, if you were to follow this straight through, it would come to a point there. So really interesting, and this really, captured my imagination, especially with all the pointed corners that there are in Baltimore, because there's so many pointed corners in Baltimore. So this was on Facebook Messenger, as I said, and so I busted out my Google Earth app on my phone, and I just started cruising around Baltimore looking for pointed corners and seeing if I could see what was near them. So I started looking around, and sure enough, I found one that ended at Hopkins, and I thought that was amazing. I was like, oh my God, it ends at Hopkins. Right? And I don't know if you could see this. It says the Johns Hopkins Children's Center. And now when you zoom in on it, it gets even better than that. So we're going to take a closer look. This is just a screen share. And so here we go with our 3/4 phased Earth, which I love, right? And if you go in too quick on like these ocean scenes, you can see what is that? So I was trying. So before, when I was first setting everything up, I was catching the Google copyright was all over the place. So I was trying to set up a joke about how Google Earth is copyrighted, I mean, and that if this were really just like pictures of our world, and they stitch them together, how could they really copyright that? If it's a factual representation of the world we live on, why copyright that? You only copyright if you're trying to make something your own. But look at this. I mean, I'm just zooming around. What was that? That is crazy. I was just trying to catch the copyrights. Okay, so here we go, coming up on it, right? Here's that point that I found just cruising around, right? And it does. It stops at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center. But what's even more amazing is the building that's next to it. And it's the Johns Hopkins Breast Center. And I couldn't believe it. Like, if you're trying to make a alternative history case where the city of Baltimore is a hub for the population reset, and that they're breeding a bunch of people and shipping them out to repopulate, it's unbelievable that you can find a point on a map that leads to a children's center and a breast center. There's more than coincidence there, right? And so as I was taking that in and looking around, I was like, well, geez, what's inside of this? If this is the point that leads to it. But while I was looking around to try to find out what was in this, I thought it was really kind of amazing how much this actually looked like those old maps, the 1851 map that I have. All right. And this is around this is Cathedral Hill area. All right, but you can see the way these buildings are sort of drawn in on it, right? And it gives you very much this type of look, right? So it makes me think that they must have had some form of aerial view of the city in order to make this, right? And so I was looking at the other maps to see, when was that, when did they start making it look like this, right? And this is the 1822 map, very similar, right? And when you look at the earlier maps, although they don't have the buildings drawn out quite that way, the few buildings that they do show in them. And now this map, I believe, I have two dates for it, 1799 and 1805. So the truth is probably somewhere in between there. right? But getting a look at these street layouts and the blocks the way they have it, you know, definitely aerial view, and I may have talked about that in the past. And also the other next map, which is I know is 1792, same kind of thing. And I hope to get into further details, because what was really brewing in my mind at this time was sort of like I could do a video based on this and just having fun with the maps and seeing what's inside of these star points, if for lack of a better term, right? And so I'm looking through this, all right, and I'm following it down this way, all right? So now you have to keep in mind this is the road here, and you have to keep following it this way. So what do we see? We see, if we get, as we get a little closer, District Court, City Hall, the Zion Church of the City of Baltimore, St. Vincent de Paul, all with just on the inside of where this ray would continue, as if you were to continue it straight on, right? And now to do it from the other side of the ray, here, to right along the top of it, the basilica would be in there. So if this is true, then, like, it goes right through the basilica here, maybe. If this is true, then that means St. Paul would be in there, as would be these other buildings. But bringing it further along this way, not only does it go through Cathedral Hill like that, but it would encompass also the B&O Railroad, right? And Charles Carroll, the barrister's house, where they rigged the American Revolution out of, and, you know, so many other very historic Baltimore places would be inside this corpuscular ray, and that's what gave me the idea to look for it on this 1851 map right here. And so I was like, wow, okay, so now it's time. Let's do an episode about fun with maps. And so I'm looking at the different maps, and I noticed on the 1820, like this, and I think I talk about it in the show, like this Cathedral Hill and the other number of churches. Like this is a Presbyterian church here, 1851. This is a Unitarian church here, 1851. Right? We had St. Paul's over here, and how all these churches are so close together. You know, I'm looking at the maps, and this is 1822, and I see that the Unitarian church is there in 1822. And now that really surprised me, and because I started thinking about it, I was like, what did I know about Unitarianism? And the answer is nothing. The full extent of my exposure to Unitarianism is that, of course, I'd seen Unitarian churches in my wanderings, but I didn't know anything about them. And this joke here.
Yo, how was the service?
What service?
The one at the Unitarian church last week where you two got married to each other?
Okay. I was like, well, I don't really know anything about the Unitarians. And so I looked up this Unitarian church, because I really thought it was so strange that it would be there with the basilica, 1822. Right? I mean, and that the Catholics, you know, would have another church in such close proximity to them, and not to mention just them, but the Anglicans as well, being headquartered just down the street. All right, now it's getting more interesting with the Unitarian, with the church being on top of Cathedral Hill. Of course, it was part of my big trespassing mission there, and so I have some pictures of it. All right, so this is the front of it here. This is that relief on top. We'll get up a little bit on him. All right, now I did find out that this is a replica that was put up there in the 1950s, but I don't know what he's got in his hands here, or what that says. I can't quite make it out. But I did find out who he was. And he is Phanuel. All right, he's a name given to the fourth angel who stands before God in the book of Enoch. All right, after Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. Other spellings of his name include Paniel, Peniel, Penuel, Phanuel, right? Orpheal, or Orpheal, which of course makes me think of Orpheus. And of course, there's that statue of Orpheus on the grounds at Fort McHenry. You know, in the first episode, right? Right. His name means the face of God. Right. So the face of God is on the side of the first Unitarian church in Baltimore. Right. He was one of the four voices. And now I want I'm not going to stay on him, but I just wanted to point out something really quickly here. The bottom of this picture here, it doesn't really say when this is, but this looks really old, you would think, right? This pattern down here reminds me of a double helix pattern, and we also have the eye in it. Yeah, the eye inside the helix. You know, it looks like his eyes here. And I've been coming across this more and more, and it's going to play more of a part down the line. But that's all I'm going to mention about it now. Just putting that out there. Right, for later. All right, so Phanuel's on the side of the First Unitarian Church. I took a couple of pictures of it. It's really not that fascinating a looking building. And this is a door that's below the ground level here. It's kind of weird. Yeah, like this was a converted window is the way I like to look at these things. But again, it didn't really draw that much attention to it, but it's definitely worth a note. All right, they want you to know that that immigrants are welcome there. Right, but don't! It's closed. Nobody's welcome there. At least not right now. Let's take a look at what actually the First Unitarian Church in Baltimore is. All right, here's their homepage. All right, they're celebrating their 200th anniversary this year, 2019. All right, and they have virtual church Sundays at 10:30. I'm thinking of going this Sunday. I might do that. I love this picture of who they are. Because, I mean, not only do like some of the sunglasses on them look pasted on and they're like actually not even wearing sunglasses, so many people are behind these trees. It's like, this was the best spot the photographer could find to take a group photo. Right in front of the Unitarian Church. I mean, there's ample room on the steps they could have taken a good group photo from. All right, there's a picture of the inside of it, which is, of course, for rent. You can host things there, right? And scrolling down. All right, the Unitarian Universalist Church, they welcome everybody, as that movie clip showed, right? And so this is them, but, you know, what else can we find out about it, right? And so there it is, and here at least you get a picture of the dome on top, which I didn't get a picture of. Oh, but I did get a picture of that I didn't show. Let's show it real quick. So this is looking north on Charles Street. Charles Street runs north to south, obviously, right? And there's the Washington Monument. You get a really good view of it from standing in the middle of Charles Street next to the Unitarian Church. All right, since the quarantine waits for no man, I got called away just as I was getting this going yesterday, and so let's start from the top again, shall we? So we're at the First Unitarian Church here on the corner of Franklin and Charles, right? And it's a historic church and congregation, right? Dedicated in 1818. Love that year. And that's also kind of important because that's before the basilica was dedicated and opened, right? But the basilica, and I don't think I have the basilica brought up, but the basilica, they say it started construction like 1805, something like that, 1805, 1806, and it took them till 1821 to get it open, right? But this thing was started in 1817 and up in 1818. And it's interesting that, right, it says it was erected for the Unitarians, but that the church is a domed cube with a stucco exterior, and that's really what it is. It's just this box right here with a dome on it. Right, it says that it was originally called the First Independent Church of Baltimore, which is interesting given that it says it was the first building erected for Unitarians, 1818. Right, and then here it says the American Unitarian Association was founded in 1825. So something that, at least here, appears to be something really new in the early 1800s, Unitarianism. So it was built in 1817, as I said, on a plot of land in Howard's Woods. If the basilica is like here, you know, it would be like right here in Howard. They call it Howard's Park here, but Howard's Woods. Right, purchased for $20,000. And I think this is an interesting total here because it makes me wonder, is this a converted total? Like in modern money versus what money was in 1817? Or is that what they paid for it in 1817? Because if they paid $20,000 for this plot that has the Unitarian Church on it, are they buying this whole rectangle here that has other properties on it already? And I think interesting the symmetrical aspects of these two properties here. And also I like this one behind it too, which makes me think of like castle walls, You know, like these are turrets. Or are they just buying this plot here for $20,000? Is it this or this? Right? Because if it's $20,000 in modern money, it means they paid something like $700 or $800 for it in 1817. Something like that. $700-800, something like that. Right? If they paid $20,000 in 1817 money, then that comes in today at roughly like $750,000 for this tract of land. So I'm kind of curious about that. You know, that's all I got. That's the only information I have on the money there. But, you know, interesting to me. $750,000 in 1817 would be an awful lot of money. All right. And so the building was designed, the box with the dome, right? All right. So it was designed by J. Maximilian Godefroy. And I looked up Godefroy a little bit to try to get some history there on the name and what it could mean. And the best I really got was that it was Geoffrey, right? But he's the greatest Geoffrey, right? And it says here he's a French emigre. And the most interesting thing about him that I could find was that he was a staunch opponent of the Bonaparte regime, right? And I think it's interesting that he emigres to Baltimore, which is a stronghold for the Bonapartes, right? And not only that, he comes here as this adversary of the Bonapartes, comes here, right? And is immediately designing the St. Mary's like seminary chapel on North Paca Street and the battle monument, right? Commemorating the siege of Baltimore and the War of 1812, right? And he becomes good friends with the British American architect Benji Latrobe, and you know, and someday Benji and I are gonna dance like for real, but it hasn't happened yet. But you know, he's the designer of the Capitol building, right? The architect of early America, Benji was, right? And of course, but he was British born. Right? And together they designed the Baltimore Merchants Exchange building, which was on South Gay Street, right, between what is now Water and East Lombard, right? It was then the then largest building in America, an H-shaped, low-domed, on a drum, Greco-Roman structure. So I read that, I was like, what? It was the largest building in America in the early 1800s? So I have a picture of it. Now, I think I may have shown this on the show before. I can't recall. I've definitely looked at this before. But here it is. I don't know the year of this sketch. So at the time, early 1800s, this is the biggest building in America. All right, and there's a photograph of it. This is the very late 1800s, or might even be 1900. It was demolished like in 1902 or something, just before the fire. Conveniently enough. You know, we can see like the top half of this other long section here is missing, at least on this side. You know, the dome, a slightly different look. I like these crazy awnings hanging from it. And I also love in this picture all the electric cable everywhere, right? There's electric cable everywhere attached to this building and along Lombard and Gay Streets, or wherever this was. Yeah, so at one time, this was the largest building in America, as I've said. You know, there was so much that went on there. It had a federal, of course, there was banks, right? The post office was there, it was City Hall, it was the Customs House, it was everything that building was, right? And so as I showed at the end of what I did yesterday, you know, that you could see the Washington Monument can be seen as a beautiful shot of it here, standing right next to the Unitarian Church on Charles Street, right? And so seeing that the same architect of the Unitarian Church also designed the Battle Monument, which I don't have a picture handy of, but I did bring up the wiki on it, and there it is. And now I don't go to the Battle Monument. But looking at this picture now, I don't know if you see what I see, right? But the base of this looks to me to be the base of an obelisk. And now, could the Battle Monument have been an obelisk that perhaps Godefroy just sculpted away at to disguise what it was for future generations? Right? Because they want to erase the fact that there were once obelisks in Baltimore, and of course it makes me think immediately of the 1880 Jubilee with that picture of the obelisk that they said was the eye of Cleopatra. And I mentioned that perhaps maybe that was actually a real obelisk that was here, and that was their cover story. That it was a replica, and that's why they got rid of it anyway. And now it makes me think that could the Washington Monument also have just been an obelisk, right? Or served the same function that those obelisks may have served. And I think it's interesting seeing the towers here again, just give you that sense of, if something was being conducted between tower sources, So interesting thought there, certainly looking at what the battle monument, at the base of the battle monument there, right? So again, getting away from it here. All right, so now, and so Phanuel here, his relief on the side of the building was designed by this Antonio Capellano, who did the carvings on the battle monument in conjunction with Godefroy as well. I guess they were good friends, right? Right, and it's significant in the history of Unitarianism as the site of William Ellery Channing's Baltimore sermon of May 5th, 1819, which laid the foundation for the Unitarian denomination. Right, and now again, the rest of the wiki kind of repeats the same information we learned about it. Of course, they have to throw all of this in as reinforcement. All these heritage areas and these sites linked, they all repeat the same information, because repetition is what drives the point home, right? Right, but this sermon that this guy does, and I brought it up, I read it, it's amazing, and I'll try to remember to leave a link for it. But in it, he says some really sort of inflammatory things about, the other denominations, right? So I figured now it's time to, and in reading some of this, like, how is this church right across the street? How is there a sermon being delivered on this mount so close to where the basilica has yet to even be finished? It is not even dedicated yet, decrying the virtues of the Roman Catholic faith. I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's time to find out more about what Unitarianism is, right? The story is crazy. And so what is Unitarianism? Right? And so it's a Christian theological movement named for its belief that the God in Christianity is one person as opposed to a trinity. And so they believe that Jesus was inspired by God, but not necessarily a deity, son of God, that kind of thing. He wasn't God incarnate. They don't believe in the Holy Spirit, although I'm sure they believe in the Holy Spirit of spectroscopy. And what they appear to be is they're like a hodgepodge. They collect like wayward Christians, right? Unitarianism does not constitute one single Christian denomination, but rather refers to a collection of both existing and extinct Christian groups. And I like that there are extinct Christian groups. Do they really go extinct, or do they just meld into something else? Whether they were historically related to each other or not, but as long as they share a common theological concept of the oneness nature of God. While the uncompromising theological monotheism at the heart of Christian Unitarianism distinguishes it from the major Christian denominations which subscribe to Trinitarian theology, Christian Unitarianism is closer to the monotheistic understandings of God in Judaism, as well as the concept of the oneness of God in Islam. More so, Muslims believe that Christian Unitarianism encompasses the one true monotheistic divine message from God perpetuated through the Abrahamic faiths that predated Islam. And I thought that was kind of amazing, right? That Muslims or the Islamic world would heap praise on any sort of heathen Christian denomination, right? Kind of interesting, right? It's also known for its rejection of other Western Christian doctrines such as original sin, predestination, and the infallibility of the Bible, right? And one interesting thing about it, and I don't know how deep I'm going to get with this, is that they believe that everyone's going to go to heaven. Right? And that the Unitarians, it began almost simultaneously in Polish Lithuania. It began almost simultaneously in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and in Transylvania in the mid-16th century. Transylvania? What? How is that? Transylvania. And I love that the flag is the teeth, of course. I mean, I don't have to draw the connections to what happened in Transylvania, right? And who came out of Transylvania? Lady Bathory and the Bathory family who ran Transylvania. Also, Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler comes out of there. Right? All not too far from this time that the Unitarian is miraculously coming together, as well as in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. We got the red and white, and was the red and white in Transylvania as well? No, there's definitely red and white in it. The original coat of arms, anyway. And again, I'm not going to get all that deep into it, but it was part of the Ottoman Empire, which is interesting. And I looked up the Ottoman Empire real quick, doing some due diligence. Bang, red and white. And so now, where else did Unitarianism rise to prominence almost right at the same time? All right, so we have the red and white here, all right, and then we have red and white in the Transylvanian flag. We have red and white in the Polish-Lithuanian. Now, I touched base, I knew that it was going to come here eventually because it's all about the color coding. All right, we got the red and white here as well, which is England. And then among its early adherents were a significant number of Italians who took refuge in Poland. So Roman Catholics, right? I wonder if any of these Italians who took refuge in Poland were Jesuit. I wonder. Things to make you go, right? And that Unitarians in Britain, and this is another thing, like it pops up in Britain, bang, right in the middle of the 16th, early 17th century. All right, it says that from the 16th to 18th century, Unitarians in Britain often faced significant political persecution. Right, but this is an interesting story, which I'm going to get to somewhere down the line, probably in Baalta, Rome, if I ever get there. Right, but it's interesting some of the names dropped here. John Biddle, Mary Wollstonecraft, who of course wrote The Modern Prometheus, Frankenstein. Right, and there's also connections, which I'll get to Unitarianism and, you're going to be prepared. I hope you're all sitting down. Right, but the Unitarians and the Quakers are connected. Right? Certainly not with the Unitarian Church being located so close to Johns Hopkins, the most famous Quaker ever. Even more famous than the Quaker Oats guy. I'm going on record as saying that. And so, yes, we will discover a connection between the Unitarians and the Quakers somewhere down the line. All right, so I think it's interesting that it all comes together in this, and it's so trying to make a linear connection to England, to Poland, to Transylvania, on a globe map here. It does work in a nice, convenient little arc. All right, and I've been finding this a lot recently, and so I'm going to be taking it's been coming together. And again, the story just keeps tying into, my masterpiece that I abandoned, which is coming. It's unbelievable because I'm now thinking, with seeing all this red and white and seeing that it's England and Poland and Transylvania that forms this Unitarianism, and that at the very least, I don't know if Poland was, let's take a look. I'll try to, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, was that ever? All right, that's Roman Catholic, but Transylvania was under the Ottoman Empire, like I looked at, right? Red and white. And so the Ottoman Empire, right, their national religion is Islam. And so now when I think that Unitarianism forms in Transylvania, Poland, England, they all have red and white, and that the Ottoman had Islam, and that it states that in the history of Unitarianism here, and again, now the phrasing of this really gets to me now, right? It says it's closer to the monotheistic understandings of God in Judaism as well as the concept of oneness of God in Islam. More so, Muslims believe that the Christian Unitarianism encompasses the one true monotheistic divine message from God perpetuated through the Abrahamic faiths that predated Islam. This really had me, all of a sudden I was thinking, it's like, wait a minute. the building, the Unitarian church, is a cube with a dome on it. And what do they worship in Islam but the Kaaba, which is a cube? Right? And now thinking, wait a minute, now if you're the Roman Catholics who control all the religion of Europe, where's that? Let's bring that back up again. And you're setting up shop over here, and you need a place, and you're carving up the world from Baltimore, all right, doing it clandestinely. You give them something that's familiar to them. You give them a giant cube. And so what is the Kaaba? Okay, and see, some of this is still really coming together for me now. If you're controlling all of this, and you're extending your control westward to the U.S., again, this is just following the narrative as it is. Because who knows? I mean, everything could have happened in reverse and everything actually started in America, right? Who knows? I don't know. Right? But if you're going with the modern narrative, if you're going with the narrative as it's presented to us, right? You're controlling all of this, right? You need to create a safe place for your friends and dignitaries from the East to travel. So what better way to do it than creating a safe spot through this Unitarian religion and setting up churches for it along the way? And you give them something familiar, right? And I think given the timing of this, with the fact that the basilica is being built at the same time, and again, all of these organizations are connected. There's not coincidences here, right? And when looking at what the Kaaba actually is, it's the house of God, right? And this is where you're supposed to pilgrimage, right? It's in Mecca, right? The most sacred site in all of Islam, all right? So I'm scrolling through this, and I come to this diagram of it here, and I think this part is interesting. They don't have the key here, and I'm just gonna do this by visual. I think this diagram is really interesting because when you look at, right, this is a cube, right? You look at the design of it of the Unitarian Church on the map, all right? We'll get up on it a little more. You see it has this rounded part on the outside, and now this is true of a lot of cathedrals, Roman Catholic churches, right? And I did actually catch a picture of it here. Coming off the back. It's rounded off the back. And so looking at this here, right? Again, another correlation that can be made there. And so again, having no understanding of Islam, there are two interpretations of the origins of the Kaaba. One is that the shrine was a place of worship for angels before the creation of man. And later a house of worship was built on the location which was lost during the flood of Noah's time, and was rebuilt by Abraham and Ishmael. And so that's the significance religiously there. And again, more interesting that the flood connects to it. So much of what we're looking at is like a recovery operation from some massive catastrophe that was floodish. Right? And so these connections, and I just cannot believe the way it's going with Islam coming in. I was wondering if there's some significance to the location here, and perhaps this could line up with Mecca. And so now setting it all up, I'm getting excited. I forget the way I want to close this, because as I always do, I love it when I can put a nice big cherry on top of an episode, and this one's got a great one. So, and wrapping this one up, it's just amazing the way these connections started to come through with the Islam and its location here. To the cathedral here and its other churches, and not to mention, just to make this joke, to the women's exchange building and the cathedral, and I'm sure they had quite the soiree, interesting parties with the female orphans asylum so close as well. It's unbelievable. So in closing this one out, I mentioned, I was thinking of doing an episode about fun with maps, and there's a lot of fun to be had with these Baltimore maps and the angles and some of the other things. But many months ago, and I left a comment on this video I'm going to show you, many months ago, I came across this video here about Fort Carroll, right, and how it's the secret axis of Robert E. Lee. And in this episode, and we can go, as a matter of fact, let's do it. I'll show you it. So here we are, here's Baltimore, right? This is Fort Carroll right here. All right, there it is. So this guy did a video about it. He's got a great channel, this Court Lindall. I'll try to remember to link him too. But he does this video about Robert E. Lee, who built and designed Fort Carroll, if you can believe that. All right, so he does this bit here where he lines up these sides, right? And one side goes to Washington, D.C., and he follows this one all the way to Jerusalem. Right to the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, right? He lines up that line in Fort Carroll. And so when I thought about the fact that if there were Muslims coming here at this time, and they needed to face Mecca, was there some alignment here? And the thought that there might be some alignment here is a new one that came to me just now, because I had aligned something else up, and I shared this with Mary just the other day. I had lined up Fort McHenry based on that video of Fort Carroll. When I was doing my fun with maps, I realized that Fort McHenry has a point on it. Like, it points into a direction. I was like, ooh, I wonder where that points. I wonder if it points to the same spot on Carroll, that Carroll Island points to, right? And so I go right down the middle of it here. All right, and I follow it along. All right, and I showed this to Mary. I'm going to share it with you now. We're going to get a straight shot following the arrow on Fort McHenry. And I was going to do this in my Fun with Maps episode. All right, as we follow this alignment along, right, through Wilmington and Philadelphia, look how close. And again, and this is also, I want to keep in mind, the copyrights of Google Earth. So these, they get to play around with these locations a little bit. But look how these cities line up. Baltimore. And again, I did not go in the direction of D.C. I just followed the arrow from Fort McHenry. So I didn't go south with it, only north. All right, Philadelphia, Trenton. All right. All right, so Philadelphia, New York. Following up north through Nova Scotia. All right. Right to Newfoundland, where, of course, this is Avalon, where our boy, the first Lord Baltimore, was first proprietor. Let's bring it back, because now we got to cross an ocean here. Goes right through the heart of France. And now this is what I was kind of expecting to see. I wanted to see how close it came to Rome. And I followed this through for Mary, or for the episode, I followed it through to Alexandria. It stops at Alexandria, all right, which is, of course, where those pillars of Cleopatra came from, right? But I decided, I was like, let me follow it along a little bit further, because I saw where Mecca was and where the Kaaba is. Right? And wouldn't you know it? You follow that line from the arrow, it goes right there. It is unbelievable that the arrow on Fort McHenry, that you can follow that line directly to the Kaaba in Mecca. And that the first Unitarian church is this giant cube with a dome on it, by the way. Anyway, so got to edit this one down. I had a blast bringing this one to you. It's unbelievable the way the connections are coming in for me. So I hope you guys had fun with this one. And until the next one, cheers, guys.